events had unfolded differently in the MCU? What if there was 4 scenarios in Iron Man 2? In today's interactive Marvel's What If, you will have an opportunity to choose your path. In the description down below, there will be 4 different timestamps for you to choose from. It's been a very, very long time since I've done interactive content, but I'm getting back into it, and I know that everybody loves it. This style of formatting will continue on the channel and keep building upon. That being said, what are you waiting for? Choose your path. Choice A. Pepper dies. Tony Stark created countless enemies around the globe, thanks to his personality and his weapons. One enemy was Whiplash, a man who created his own tech to rival Tony's. Upon arriving and battling Tony, Tony found himself fighting for his life with the help of the new War Machine. Tony and Rhodey were concerned by the unmanned drones, and they fought as hard as they could to hold them off when Whiplash showed up to finish them off. Tony and War Machine were almost killed by Whiplash, but they defeated him after performing a move that caused a large explosion. It broke them free, but Whiplash pulled one last move they weren't expecting. He self-destructed himself and all of the drones. Realizing what that meant, Tony flew in the air, out of fear for Pepper's life. He soared through the night sky and searched for her, finding her near one of the beeping drones. Adrenaline dipped into his veins as he increased his speed. As soon as he dropped down to grab her, the bomb went off and they went flying backwards. Tony saw stars. His vision faded in and out of consciousness. Even the suit didn't protect him fully from the blast. Fractures and bruises he received. His head throbbed as he came back to his senses. Pepper popped into his mind and he got on his knees and crawled to search for her. Calling out to her, he found her body on the ground. Half of it burnt, while the other half was covered in dust. He scanned for a pulse, but there was none. Refusing to believe that it was real, he called for medical attention. They could not save her. Nobody could. Whiplash may not have killed Tony, but in a way, he still won. He destroyed Tony's emotional state. Whiplash made Tony feel the same pain that he did. Thanks to this, Tony never came out of his old habits. He refused to quit drinking and partying to get his mind off of the pain. He never joined the Avengers, meaning he never sacrificed himself in 2012 during the Battle of New York. War Machine filled his spot on the roster. He was the one to make the sacrifice play. Only War Machine didn't come back. When Tony heard about War Machine's death, he didn't lose hope like he did with Pepper. He realized how selfish he was. All that he cared about was falling apart around him. Thanks to this realization, he worked on himself, offering his tech to those in need and bettering himself as a person. S.H.I.E.L.D. scouted him and had him as a contact, but it wasn't until 2 years later that Iron Man became a member of the Avengers. Ultron never happened since Tony wasn't in the right mental state to create the program. Civil War happened later than it would have otherwise. After the events with Wanda causing unnecessary destruction, the UN took longer to decide the right course of action. There was a revised version of the Accords that stated superheroes would get put on trial if they continued to act recklessly in their endeavors. They were limiting the scope of superhero activity, and Steve left to protect his friend Bucky. Tony was torn between two sides, but ultimately chose to sign the Accords. When he learned the truth about the death of his parents, he was enraged. He beat Bucky and blasted off his arm. But when he went for the finishing blow, he hesitated. Not because he wasn't furious, rather because he realized what Whiplash meant all those years ago. He felt the same thing Whiplash did, and it terrified him, to see the monster that he was becoming. He slumped over, both Bucky and Steve confused by his sudden refusal to fight. They left Tony there, and he reflected on his actions for hours before deciding to return. He didn't have Rhodey by his side like he wished he did. He still felt the loss of Rhodey and Pepper every day. After Civil War, Tony went through Thanos with the help of the remaining Avengers. He went to Titan to battle Thanos, but they lost. And Iron Man watched Spider-Man fade into dust in his arms. Tony never got over it. After he was rescued by Captain Marvel, he never stopped looking for a solution. He had no Pepper or Rhodey to keep him company. When Steve approached him with the time travel, Stark took the opportunity and began working on it. When he figured it out, he sprung into action and made the plan with the Avengers. The time travel worked, but the timeline was altered thanks to Pepper and War Machine's deaths. When the time came for Thanos to reappear to battle for the stones, the Avengers lost. Thanos received the stones and wiped out what was left of life. He rebuilt from the ground up, creating a grateful universe, becoming King Thanos. The Avengers were gone, even Earth was gone. Thanos created new planets, new people, and new resources to help the new generation flourish. To Thanos, he made a better world, but it was at the cost of an entire known universe. Choice B. What if War Machine kills Tony Stark? War Machine's suit was compromised. Against Rhodey's will, he was attacking Tony Stark. They flew through the flashing lights and panicked crowds, exchanging shots. Tony tried to slow the War Machine down, but the suit was nearly unstoppable. Tony ducked and dived to avoid the advanced weaponry, but it was up to Natasha to figure out the code to shut it down. They continued to fight, but Rhodey got the upper hand. Tony was shot down, flying to the ground and landing with an earth-shattering thud. The War Machine went to the surface, Rhodey shouting and begging himself to stop, but it was no use. The War Machine finished Tony off before Natasha could disable it. War Machine froze when the job was done. He scanned for a pulse and found none. Rhodey was too stunned to speak. Natasha shut his suit down not even a minute later, but he didn't notice. He fell to his knees and took off the machinery, going to Tony with a silver of hope left that he was alive. He wasn't. Stark was dead. From that day forward, the entire universe was impacted. Whiplash was taken down by the government with the help of Natasha and War Machine. The War Machine's suit was destroyed in the process, but Rhodey was okay with that. After he caused the death of his friend, he refused to ever man a War Machine suit again. He walked away, and Natasha respected his wishes. The entire timeline of the Marvel Universe has shifted. Without Iron Man to lead the charge, even the first Avengers were impacted. There was no one available to make the sacrifice play that Iron Man did. War Machine couldn't wear his suit out of fear and regret, which caused the New York invasion to be a success. With the Avengers out of the picture, Loki easily took over Earth and ruled them. He wanted to expand his empire, but thanks to his success on Earth, Thanos came and sped up his plans. He exchanged power for loyalty. Thanos offered Loki a large role in his plans, as well as a spot on the throne, whichever planets and realms he wished. Loki accepted and aided Thanos in his journey to collect all of the Infinity Stones. Thanos accomplished his goals of taking the stones, and he snapped, much sooner than anticipated. During the snap, he honored his deal with Loki and kept him alive, granting him access to whichever planet he chose. Loki remained on the New Earth as their leader, turning the human species into his people. However, it wasn't enough for Loki. He expanded throughout the galaxy, taking planets captive and becoming their ruler. Thanos was in retirement and didn't notice the change, not like he cared enough to do something about it. Loki was a walking empire. He had succeeded in all of his plans and wished to continue conquering the galaxy. However, Captain Marvel had found him. His army slowed her down, but she was too powerful and eventually got to him. While he was on Earth, they dueled, and Loki put up a solid fight. He injured her to the point where she was on the ground. It seemed as though Loki won, but she baited him into coming closer. She finished him off, saving the rest of the galaxy, and maybe even the universe from being conquered by the god of mischief. However, it took time to liberate the planets under his control. She led a resistance and rescued all those who were impacted by the war. Regardless of Captain Marvel's involvement, she only saved the planets from Loki. She couldn't save the universe from the Mad Titan and the Snap. It was too late. She couldn't figure out a way to reverse what had been done. She mourned Fury, vowing to become Earth's protector, now since he was gone. She helped the Earth move on, but it took over a decade. During that time, she aided as many as she could, all throughout the galaxy and universe. She did her best, but that was a task far too massive for one person. The universe was forever sorrowed by deaths of so many. And while governments were falling apart, people were losing their minds, and superheroes were turning into villains. Thanos sat and watched the sun rise on his version of a grateful universe. Choice C. Whiplash wins. Whiplash wanted Tony Stark to feel the same pain as him. Stark had no idea what was going on. Growing up, Ivan was seen as less than nothing. He was the offspring of a disregarded scientist. He lived in the shadows of a father who became disowned by the science community. Despite learning all he could from his father, he still lost him. Whiplash never had the opportunity to live the way he wanted to. He never lived at all. And much of that was thanks to Howard Stark, for causing his father to become what he was. Whiplash knew that he needed revenge. It wasn't because he craved a purpose in life. It was because he wanted someone else to feel the pain he was experiencing. He was lost. He was hurting. And no one was there to feel that agony with him. That led him to Tony Stark. After being recruited by Hammer to design suits for him, he made a secret plan that could accomplish his revenge. First, he targets Stark's friends, then his lover, and finally, when he suffered enough, Whiplash would kill him. There was a part of him that wondered if killing Tony would make him happy, but he pushed that voice away and refused to give it any attention. When the day came to enact his plan, he did it effortlessly. The drones were under his control and he could storm in and take his revenge. The one man, War Machine they were calling him, was broken free from the program, but was no matter. Whiplash would handle him personally. Whiplash donned his suit and went to fight War Machine and Stark. They clashed and Whiplash got the upper hand. Sensing the two had a plan to break free, he didn't hesitate. He threw Tony away, then took the time to execute War Machine. When he was gone, Tony came back and was horrified by the death that happened right in front of his face. Whiplash captured him and held Stark in his whips while he stormed through the expo. He didn't kill any who weren't necessary, only charging toward his lover. She tried to run, and Stark tried to stop it. It was no use. The woman wasn't spared from his wrath. She died with the War Machine. Stark, completely broken from the truth that was his new life. Whiplash slowed his pace and let what was left of his drones surrounding him. They protected him from any attacks. He came closer to Stark and whispered about all the horrors he saw growing up. And more specifically, he told him about what Stark's father did. Tony told him he wasn't responsible for his father's actions. That only succeeded in angering Whiplash further. Whiplash ranted about how selfish Tony was. Without wasting any more time, he killed Pepper, giving Tony time to react. He watched the way Tony broke. It was a beautiful sight to him. Only then did Whiplash kill him. He waited until the very last second, when he heard sirens coming his way. Then, Stark was dead, and Ivan vanished. From there, Whiplash went into hiding in his hideout, and he created more tech and built more drones. It was his goal to build his own little army. He didn't wish to be the disgrace his father was. He wanted to atone his father's sins and create inventions that would earn him the title his father was robbed from. So that's what he did. He made a more corrupt version of the Ultron program, creating suits of armor that could protect the world from themselves. As his tech got more expensive, he found allies who believed in his cause. and together they created a small alliance. Whiplash worked in a large warehouse, now giving him enough space to make the drones he needed. With funding and space, Whiplash was able to complete his project. He named it after his father, and when it was ready, he sent the drones out to do their jobs. The world panicked and protested. His drones weren't like Ultron. They weren't artificial intelligence. They were controlled by Whiplash at all times. So, if anyone ever tried to hunt the drones down, or even hurt them, he had the people killed. In the course of one day, Whiplash created a system that killed more than it had saved. Just like that his father, he became disgraced and hunted down. He was already wanted, but now, the entire world was searching for him. It wasn't long after they had found him. Whiplash refused to submit to authority. He was devastated he wasn't able to crawl out of the hole he dug himself into, and he self-destructed every drone to halt the project and caused him to go down in history for what he had done. Whiplash was arrested before he could follow in the footsteps of the drones. He was locked up and killed while in prison. The Accords went through and caused civil war, but thanks to Tony Stark and War Machine's deaths, Steve Rogers' side had won and took down the Accords, saving Bucky, and the superheroes only wanted to do their jobs. When Thanos came around, they were ready, but it was impossible to win without Stark. The universe was fated for failure. Not only did the snap occur, but there was no way to bring the people back. Steve was one of many who were snapped, joining Tony and the other Avengers who passed away. Choice D. What if Whiplash attacked Pepper? Pepper was overseeing the arrest of Hammer and the evacuation of the citizens when she realized the air felt different than normal. The police were running around and the civilians were making it difficult to focus, but she saw it. There was a single male figure walking towards her, moving against the rest of the rushing crowd. She stumbled but held her ground, fearing the man was left without help. However, she would regret staying in the area. The man revealed himself as Whiplash, wrapping a cord around her neck and refusing to let her move or speak. If she moved too much, he'd kill her out of fear. She'd stay silent, and he used her to get to Tony. He communicated with Stark, baiting him to return to the expo. When he did, he told Rhodey to come help. After Whiplash watched as Stark departed his suit, as a way of showing he wasn't a threat, Whiplash wasn't impressed by the display, opting to wrap a second whip around Tony's neck to keep him in check. Whiplash poured his heart out to Stark. He told him not his plans, but about the way he resented Stark for all he did. Stark was ashamed of himself. Whiplash reminded him of his habits and ego, scolding him for refusing to help the world with the tech he had, and instead spending his time drinking and setting up flashy expos that did nothing but show off his wealth. There was a voice inside Stark's head that told him Whiplash was right. Although he believed he was dying, Tony still allowed himself to slip into an oblivion nonetheless. Instead of doing something valuable with the time that he had, he made a blunt decision and got hammered more than he should have. Whiplash was hitting Tony in his heart, and he found himself averting his eyes to avoid the shame that came with it. Pepper was holding something that he couldn't see in her hands, him peeking to figure out what it was before Whiplash did. Then he realized she was holding a part of the Iron Man suit, the glove part of it. He could use it to pry off the whip without damaging himself. She gave him the nod as Whiplash continued to bash Tony for his crimes against humanity. Stark didn't disagree with a single word he said, which caused his throat to dry and his eyes to swell with hot oozing tears. When Pepper finally threw the glove, he almost wasn't ready. He barely caught it in time and pried the whip off, helping Pepper get out before he returned to his suit and grabbed her. Flying up, War Machine came, diving down and knocking Whiplash to the ground to capture him. They took him into custody, and Tony was scared from the experience. He vowed to become better than what Whiplash described. He was ambitious with his next few projects, eventually joining the Avengers and making the sacrifice in New York. Mere days after, he created the Ultron program. He couldn't wait any longer. He let Ultron become a reality. When Tony realized his mistake with Ultron, He couldn't handle his emotions. Whiplash had been right the entire time. No matter what Tony had done, he would always mess up. He hurt his relationship with Pepper. He hurt his friends, and now he had harmed the entire world. Countless died, and Tony refused to take part in any future Avengers events. Tony suggested superheroes were a threat to the world, and the UN agreed. The UN became more strict with the Accords shortly after the events of the Age of Ultron. Although Ultron was defeated, the UN was appealed by how much death was caused because one genius got too greedy. They limited the reach of superheroes and banned Tony from making any future projects without supervision from a government official. It didn't matter. Tony didn't wish to create any new tech anyway. He was burning with regret. When Avengers Infinity War came around, Tony didn't want to get involved. Out of fear he'd make it worse. He didn't, and then the snap came. He learned of the death of half of the Avengers. That convinced him to search for answers. When Steve showed up at his door years later, Tony was pleading for a solution. He never had a kid with Pepper. They never got married. Due to the path Tony was going down, Pepper left and moved on with her life. Tony was still caught up in the past, and he used Steve's plan as a way to redeem himself for all of his mistakes. The time travel plan had worked. Iron Man was back with a new suit he made under supervision. The Endgame era came, and Iron Man went after Thanos. With his new suit, he took the stones and was desperate to snap. He snapped without hesitation. He allowed himself to slip away as he saved the universe. Tony Stark redeemed himself after years of living in remorse and regret. The Avengers held a funeral for him, honoring his memory and reassuring him that he did good. And that is going to be What If Iron Man 2, the interactive Marvel's What If. If you enjoy these interactive fan fictions where you get to choose, do make sure to subscribe, guys, and don't miss out on this channel. Become a part of the community. I highly recommend it. You can take requests. I'm always taking them. I'm always responding to you guys. I'm just always here. So what are you doing? What are you waiting for? Join the community. Join right now. You know, we're taking subscribers. We're almost at 200,000 subscribers. We're almost there. Do make sure you do it. I would highly recommend it. Interactive what ifs are going to be a main thing on this channel. Let me know what choice you made and why you made that choice. Which one did you like the best, and would you like to see more? Anyways, as always, thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day. Peace out.